Hey guys, Storm here. So this month's challenge is going to be something that's pretty dear to me. What I like to do is I like to ferment in a traditional Polish style. I've talked about it a couple of times here and there. Um, I try to make it mostly traditional. I do my own take on it a little bit. I like it a little bit higher ABV and a little bit lower residual sugar than is strictly traditional. But everyone's got to put their own take on a piece of art, I guess, and Mead's as much an art as anything else is. One of the real big hot takes, though, on Polish mead is sugar inversion. So what they do is you can go and take the sugar as normal, or you can go heat it for a while. The trick is you don't boil it. This is not a bochet. It's not caramelized. It should maybe have a little teeny tiny bit of it, but not a ton. The idea is that you take the sucrose and you break it down into more glucose and fructose. Sounds like it makes sense. That's how it works for table sugar. But then you go think about what's really in honey. It's about 5–10% on the outside sucrose. What are you really breaking down to go turn into these sweeter sugars? In theory, you're making the honey sweeter, increasing the Brix, a couple of other things like that that make it better for mead. But then, now in modern mead making, we say, oh, don't heat your honey. So I have a crock pot. Let's see if I can show you over there. Pardon the mess. That was going for 4 hours now. It took about 2 hours to get up to temperature. Held it for an hour and a half, and it's cooling down now. And I have a nice local wildflower early harvest honey. Fantastic. I absolutely love it. I've been fermenting a lot of gallons with it right now. And so I caramelized some of it. No, excuse me. Cooked some of it, and then the rest I left as is. Looking at the two, I can see that the stuff that I cooked is just a skosh darker, but like if you're looking at a caramelization wheel, it's like one step up from not caramelized at all. So the question is, did this do something to the sweetness, and did this do something to the aromatics of the honey? I'm not going to judge the aromatics right now. I'm going to try a little bit, but really at the end of the day, after it's fermented, is what really matters. So, two honeys. This one, thin, compared to a caramelized honey. It's maybe a little thicker than regular honey at room temperature. It's very good. Sweet. I still have that wildflower taste to it. I'd still describe it as this, great, rich wildflower, something I'd be very eager to ferment with. Now the other one, a little bit thinner here. And it's less sweet. I really didn't expect that, but I had a couple of samples along the way, so I already knew what the result was. The honeys are different with the sugar inversion that I've been doing here. I don't understand the chemical changes to it, and I spent like the last week doing research onto this, and it's not well documented in honey. It's very well documented in table sugar, and turning into sugars that you'd use for candies and stuff like that. But with honey, it just isn't there. I never hit the temperature for caramelization on here, but you can clearly taste a little bit more toffee, light toffee, in the honey that I caramelized for a bit. You smell it, and it's very aromatic. Uh, Definitely got just a hint of that caramelized flavor to it. And the other one smells more raw. I mean, it's not rocket science what happened. I was cooking it, but it's not a weaker flavor. It's a different flavor. So if it's the right one, well, that depends on what you're doing with it. Uh, I'm going to find out. I'm going to do two side-by-side batches, and then I'm going to do blind triangle testing and say, hey, these two are done the exact same way with the tart fruit. Which one do you like more? And I'm going to be curious to see what the final gravity is, what the perceived sweetness difference is. If I need more acid in one, the caramelization or the sugar inversion that I was doing requires a acid to make it happen at the low temperatures that I was doing. I used cream of tartar. You can find it at your local grocer. You can look up charts for how much you should add and figure out how much you need to put in there to get your sugar to invert, how long and at what temperature you need to hold it for. Basically, I did 190 for an hour, hour and a half, plus the whole ramp up to that temperature in my crock pot. That was slower than I thought. I thought my crock pot was going to get there in a hell of a lot faster. But even on high, it was not exactly a rocket ship. So, Polish meats. How do you define a Polish mead? You've got the amount of sugar that is in it versus the amount of water. They are done by volume. The two that I like are dwojniak and trojniak. So you can go onto Wikipedia or whatever you feel like. And dwojniak is 1 to 1, 1 part honey, 1 part water. It's roughly 1.2 starting gravity. A little bit lower than that in reality, but don't let the math get in the way of things too much. Trojniak is a typical 15% mead, more or less, with a little bit of a semi-sweet finish. Um, I like to ferment both of those a little bit higher. Traditionally, Trojniak is 15, and then Dwojniak is 18%. I ferment the first at 18 and the last at 20 to 21. And then put in a little bit more sugar than usually to get up to about 1.03, I think is a really good sweet spot. If you're using more fruit, you need a bit more. Traditionally, Polish meads have fruit or oak or juices or hops or all this other stuff in it, but it's playing second fiddle to the honey. You're never going to have like a no water Polish mead. As far as I understand it, that style doesn't exist that way. There's also minimum aging time requirements with modern nutrition. Those thankfully don't apply to us quite so much. Dwojniaks you can drink in under 2 years if your staggered nutrient additions are good. And definitely a Trojniak is better after a year than it is after 6 months. But hey, if you can drink it sooner, may as well do so. So this month, what I'm going to be doing is I have a bunch of black currants left. I'm getting a little tired of black currant mead. I bought like 200 pounds of them, and I only used 100 pounds in one of the batches that I was using. But hey, black currant's delicious. So I'm going to do probably 2 pounds per gallon on this, and I'm going to do a dwojniak. Normally I step feed these. This time, fuck it. It is straight fruit. It is going to be fruit, water, yeast, just like it's supposed to be for this style. And then we're going to see what the final gravity comes out to be. I think with the black currant, my final gravity is going to be perfectly balanced, and I'm not going to need to back sweeten or anything. And then we get to compare the results in the end. Pyment from last month. That's going to need some time. It does, however, taste like grapes and honey, and smells like both. I think this is going to be a great mead in 3 months, but for now, no. It has some residual sugars. I don't think I'm going to balance it outside of maybe a little bit of an acid addition. I think the sweetness is good where it's at. The body's great. Tannins are good. Um, I'm not getting a ton of cotton candy from those cotton candy grapes that I've got in there, but hey, you'll see how it goes. I got it off the skins pretty quickly there. I don't think I'm going to have too much excessive tannin in it. I don't think I'm going to oak it. Just keep it right the way it is. Um, Other things that you could go think to put in your Polish meads this time around: strawberries, plums, sour cherries, tart cherries are all huge. Oak and gooseberry, however you want to say it, are all good options. Anyhow, we'll put this up on the subreddit in a little bit. Look forward to see what you guys are going to be making. See you around. So I just finished with what I was recording, and I figured, there's a couple of things I missed. I wanted to take a look at a couple other parts. So this is what I'm using for a controller. It's Inkbird for like 30 bucks, cheap as shit. So what you've got is a little probe, and you can put this in any liquid that you feel like. in my case, the honey. And I've got a real old school crock pot. I bought this for $5 a long time ago in college. The big thing about it is it's one of the old school ones that has, there we are, on, off, that's it. You can set how hot you want it, basically. This is important because the modern ones shut off if you go cut the power to them with a inkbird like this. What this does is it just turns off the power plug, basically, when you're at a specific temperature, and then turns it back on when you drop under your set point. You can kind of hardwire a modern one to work like an old school one if you have to, but it's dangerous, and you didn't hear it from me that you can do it. So with one of these guys, you just can caramelize your honey if you want to go set it to a high point. You got to make sure you stay it under the point where it foams. But I had this pot filled all the way. I put, I don't know, a gallon and a quarter ish of honey in a gallon and a quarter, and like that much more extra space on it, and no foaming, no nothing. I get a little bit of caramelization. If I left it in there for 20 hours, I'd get a huge amount of caramelization in it afterwards. So one thing to keep the distinction: there's sugar inversion, there is Maillard reactions, there is caramelization, and there is God, what's the last one? HMF, which is like a measure of how much the honey has been heated. Normally, that heating happens in the hive, or if someone's a shitty beekeeper and cuts their honey with corn syrup, that can also make the HMF higher because high fructose corn syrup naturally has a higher HMF value because of the way it is. Now, we like that HMF to it. That actually is some of the caramely flavors that you're used to. A little bit of toffee and marshmallow comes specifically from that. Just because your honey is high in that doesn't mean it's a bad honey for what you're looking for. It just may not be the honey that you want to use in every situation. Uh, we're making it artificially here. Very, very high HMF after a heat, to 190 Fahrenheit. So caramelization, that's a little different. So that happens specifically at 200, 300 plus Fahrenheit in pure sugars. When you add water to the mix, the reaction actually happens a little bit lower. Acidity affects it. It's super, super complicated. And if someone comes out in the comments and tells me exactly how they know everything about those details, please do so. I have been looking for a really long time for really good papers explaining how it works in honey, and I can't find a thing about it. Uh, the other one is the Maillard reaction. I've got all these pulled up on Google, pages I've been referencing here. Um, so normally that's like when you brown toast or meat. It's kind of that umami taste you get when you sear a steak, and you get some of those reactions when you sear the snot out of honey. Um, and those can create really, really complicated flavors and bouchées that develop with time. Now, whether or not we get that with an ink bird, I'm not the organic chemist who can tell you. Um, Again, something in the comments if you know otherwise. But the sugar inversion, that is the real big deal. What's something that's cool, you can look at it with a polarized lens, and based on how the light comes back from it after you shine a wavelength through it and how it reflects back, you can tell how much of the sugar is inverted. Honey is mostly inverted because it's glucose and fructose. The sucrose has a different polarity to it. If I had fancy tools, I would have loved to go take a look at that honey, shining a light through it, and then seeing what happened, uh, as I heated it. I don't have those tools. I'm gonna try to keep my weights really, really, really accurate when I go and make these batches, and then I can go and prove if the density was different of the honey, which in theory, the density and the bricks will change. Um, when I go and caramelize, heat, sugar invert, whatever the hell this is here. Uh, so that's the part that I'm not real sure on, and that's the thing that I'm really, really excited to be doing this time around is to see what are the differences when we heat honey. We always go and parrot the line that you don't want to heat honey to preserve the aromatics, this, that, and I think that's true. Um, but you can't let the what's the expression? You can't let perfect be the enemy of good, so you got to make sure that you're getting what you want out of your honey and not just following a bunch of guidelines. Every honey is right for the right task. You don't use mesquite when you want orange blossom. You don't use orange blossom when you want tupelo. You don't use boucher when you want meadow foam. Um, Putting it all together, picking the right thing for what you want, putting your ingredients together so the fruit matches the honey, and huge, huge, huge big process. And I'm hoping that learning more about this sugar inversion gives me another tool that I can put in my tool chest and pull out when I say I want this flavor presented this way to match with these other ingredients. Anyhow, this got a little bit longer than I meant, but I'm really glad with the second half of the segment here. See you around.